While local and international investors and markets were surprised by the last time the national budget was postponed, some reactions have been mild so far. Business reporter Ntokozo Khumalo joins us now for an update. And Ntokozo, good morning to you. We all remember the shock when we realised that the budget speech was going to be postponed. Markets were fairly sanguine about it. What are investors going to be looking for when the budget is tabled this afternoon, presuming it goes ahead?
Good morning, Stephen. Well, the day has started here in Africa's richest mall, and we are outside the JSC block where a lot of corporates will be having their war rooms, really unpacking what is to be expected when Finance Minister Ntokozo will table that budget later on today. But I am here with Nico, Banda, who is a fiduciary specialist with Gradidge and Mahura Investments. Thank you so much for talking to us. Now, that surprise, but a mild reaction from markets when we saw that postponement in February. Just remind our viewers on how markets reacted and why we perhaps saw that surprise but not quite a reaction when the budget was postponed.
I think markets and investors want stability and consistency, so a delay in an expected budget is bound to have some reaction. A mild one, as you've said, I think besides bond yields, and that's probably the fear of some collapse in the GNU, as well as the possibility of borrowing. That probably why they had the biggest change. But I think from a RAND perspective and an equities perspective, not much movement. I think they still hope there. Yeah.
And now you represent high net worth individuals, and of course wealth tax being one of the issues that have been on the table for South Africa to raise its revenue. Talk us through how that demographic is then looking at the budget and why it's not as easy as that to raise tax on the rich.
Look, I think, wealth taxes is something that probably gets spoken about a lot, but the reality is we do have different types of taxes for the wealthy. I mean, when you look at transfer duty on really high value properties and capital gains tax, those are really taxes aimed at, pretty much the wealthier demographic, and those already exist. For a large number of wealthy people, they do already have structures in place and they do have tax planning, and to levy a wealth tax is a bit complex because you have to look at all those structures, how they form part of, a wealth calculation. And then how do you levy the tax? Do you levy it on all the assets in those structures, including, the person? Is it a deemed one? Do they then have to make cash available? Because for a lot of people, a bulk of the net worth is in actual assets and not in liquid cash, so which could affect them quite significantly. So I think it's quite a complex one, and I don't think we'll probably get that in this budget speech.
Complicated, as you said, and just finally, we are a couple of hours to then Finance Minister taking that podium later on that afternoon to then deliver the budget. Expectations, I know a lot of corporates, a lot of the banks, yourselves included, will be having an investment conference just to unpack what comes out of the budget. Expectations and what you'll be telling some of your high net worth wealth clients.
Look, I think for a lot of people, the first one will be that VAT increase. Obviously that has a big impact. If you're a business owner, VAT is payable on invoicing, not on actual cash received. That's a big cash flow requirement. So, if they did go ahead with an additional 2%, that would require quite a bit of cash flow. And then I think we don't expect it to be 2%, but probably will be about, 0.5% to 1%. Again, still affect cash flow. It's still going to affect consumers. I think the fuel levy might change. I think sin tax, that was already above inflation in the contemplated budget speech. So I think that might go a bit higher or stay the same. But yeah, I think where we might lose out will be the income tax thresholds. I don't think those will be adjusted, unfortunately, especially if they're not going to get the 2%. But I think, we don't expect the corporate tax to change. I think the finance minister made it quite clear that we need to encourage capital to come in. We need to encourage businesses. So I think that will largely remain the same. So the question is where they get that 60 billion if they don't increase the VAT with an additional 2%.
Nico, thank you so much for talking to us. Nico Banda, Stephen, a fiduciary specialist with Gradidge Mahura Investments, just giving us, or singing rather, the same tune that we've been explaining to our viewers over the past 2 weeks since the budget was postponed, that it's really about the revenue that the country brings in and how we are spending that revenue to ensure that it goes towards really growing the economy. Muted growth in 2024 at 0.6%, missing even the National Treasury's revised forecast of 0.8%. So Nico there representing high net worth individuals in the country, saying that it would be very complicated to tax them even further. So that is the question to then see where Finance Minister will say that money will come from. Their expectations of that increase of between 0.5 and 1 percentage points to try and boost up that revenue to cover our expenses as a country and try to get the budgets as close to possible, as balancing as possible. But of course, that would impact, Stephen, the medium term. So the next 3 years would also be an issue, considering the country's high debt levels and low growth environment, Stephen.
And Ntokozo, there is so much going on in the world right now. If you look at what's happening with the tariffs that are being imposed by the US President Donald Trump, and the extraordinary situation we saw last night where one of the provinces of Canada was imposing its own electricity taxes on the United States, and Trump was imposing further tariffs on Canada in response. And yet, this is the kind of moment when our politicians need to make sure they manage things properly. I imagine that, yes, we may be a relatively small economy compared to the United States, but our reputation matters. If there are more problems with the budget today, that would be very difficult for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Nico did point that out as we were chatting, Stephen, that while, South Africa might, see another postponement if there's no agreement, that is a small chance, because we cannot afford that, because all eyes will be on us. That first postponement, the markets may have let it go to say it's rather to be safe and go back to the drawing board and make sure that a workable budget is presented. But it's more than 2 weeks since then. So that might not bode well for the country, because it would point to that mismanagement and really not combing through the budget in a way that raises that business and consumer confidence, Stephen.
Ntokozo Khumalo, thanks very much indeed. Do appreciate that update from the JSE, part of our team covering the budget for you.